the Broncos. All sorts of records broken there. Last week, I didn't introduce us. A bit arrogant, really. My name is Steve Mascord, and I'm here with Jimmy Smith. How are you, Jimmy? Now, I mean, that was just... It was weird because it was like, on one hand, at 29-0 at half-time, you kind of thought you could put some tea on and not even watch the second half. But then on the other hand, it was kind of, you couldn't look away, really. It was you just wanted to know, how far that scoreboard was going to tick over.
Just incredible. How are you, Steve? Hope you're well, and I hope all the listeners and the viewers are well too. Yeah, embarrassing. Truly embarrassing. I know they've had a lot of young players in this side, the Brisbane Broncos, and there's lots of senior players who are out at the moment, and the inexperience of the team was documented well throughout the course of that match. But, wow, I can't help but think, based on, what do we have, 5 games ago, they were beaten 58-0 by the Parramatta Eels. That was in a semi-final, and there was all sorts of question marks. And obviously it was a much stronger side than this one. All sorts of question marks about players' preparations, and then there was it came out that they were at the pokies at different stages, and which wouldn't have been a problem except they lost 58-0.
Yeah.
Question marks on Anthony Seibold from a coaching perspective. All the drama around Darius Boyd, what they're going to do with him. Anthony Milford's $1 million player allegedly, and I'm loath to criticise players because of what they get paid. But when you start thinking about you're taking up nearly a tenth of the salary cap, we believe, and he played like he did tonight, like he literally did not want to take the line on at any point. So Roosters exceptional. Roosters absolutely exceptional. They seem to have adjusted very quickly to these new rules, Steve. I don't know whether you felt that they were that way inclined, but Jake Friend running out of dummy half more than ever. Keary, when he gets the ball, changes the speed of the game. Flanagan had his best game for the Roosters. And then some of the forwards, Warrior Hargreaves early. Victor Radley was sensational. There was literally not a bad player on the field for the Roosters.
Yeah, I think the burning question, I think a lot of people raised on social media, even from halfway through the first half, Jimmy, is, we've only had one close game since the rule changes came in with the 6 again. The burning question is, to what extent are the rule changes responsible for that? And is it good? I mean, clearly the rules off the field, we are intended to keep the competition and the games even, i.e. the salary cap.
Yep.
And I guess philosophically, we have to sort of, examine beyond the nuts and bolts whether the rules on the field also should be designed to keep the games even. Rugby league is much harder to artificially impose parity than some other sports. For instance, in soccer, there's 2 or 3 scoring opportunities or 2 or 3 scores a game. So teams which on paper are very different in ability can still be very close near full time. In rugby league, they're running at each other. And they're not just using the ball, they're using their bodies. And it's much harder for an underdog to hang in there for 80 minutes and get a result. So the rules are already make it difficult for, to maintain that sort of parity through the whole period of the match. And have we introduced rules that have made it even harder now?
Yeah, and I'm a great believer in the fact that supremacy should be rewarded, right? If you're that much better, then it's not up to the referee to drag you back into the game, or drag the opposition back into the game. So, that's what home crowds do, right? So it's really interesting that the Broncos in front of no one suffer their biggest loss in their history at anywhere, and their biggest loss at Suncorp Stadium. The first time ever they haven't been able to score a point at Suncorp Stadium. So all that happened in front of an empty Suncorp Stadium, where the referee usually is getting under pressure from the home fans for, they've been doing it all day, sir. So that's interesting in itself. I don't know, Steve. You can't have it each way, can you? Reward the team for their dominance, but you want close games as well. You can't have it both ways. The perfect mix is that game. I don't know whether you saw it, Panthers and Newcastle, where down 14-0, Newcastle had no right to stay in that game, and yet that was as compelling a game of footy as you will see in a long time.
Yeah, but it's the only close one we've had so far. And I actually do think, it is a responsibility of the legislators to not allow the coaches to make the game boring. And so we've had this change, which has introduced, I think, a lot more entertainment. But it's equally, the people legislating for the rules are representing the fans and the broadcasters, media partners, sponsors. So they are trying to create a product that's attractive. And, I think by the end of this weekend, we'll be able to see, I think if we look at the sample sizes, you'll be able to do some statistical analysis on the margins. And I don't think big margins are good. And I think if we saw, again, I'll do the plug again, writing a book about 1997, the start of the 1997 season, the play the balls were far too quick in Super League. They thought that they were reacting against something that was bad in the game, which at the time was like the one out running and all this sort of stuff. And what they got was players diving at the feet of defenders and playing the ball really quickly, had big scores. And it was only when they saw the rules in action that they could see the flaws in them, and that the ruck started to slow down again by the end of the year under Graham Annesley and Bill Harrigan, all those sort of guys making decisions. And I think we're at a similar point with this rule where we've seen the good sides of it last weekend, but we saw hints that it encouraged big scorelines. Tonight, we saw a hint of that again. I think by the end of the weekend, if we don't have another close game, it'll be more than a hint.
It wasn't unattractive footy tonight. So that's one thing. Like, there was ball movement, and some of the tries the Roosters scored were really, really full of skill. But I take your point, because how many Broncos fans are watching the last 20 minutes? And that's that's what you talk about with the broadcasters.
Yeah, exactly. And they've already said, Peter V'landys has already said that he took the broadcasters' views on board in introducing these rules, that the game had become a little bit boring. I mean, I think a lot boring at times. I mean, there was so much, one out running, and there was, you needed to be an exceptional player to shine in the NRL, to impose yourself on a game in the NRL, because it was so controlled. And that's awesome that we've now, taken those shackles off. So it's an important step forward, and it certainly is a good idea. But that doesn't mean it's finished. That doesn't mean that it's perfect, or and I think if we do start to see constant floggings, then I think the people who did a good job, on the chalkboard in the rules room before we returned, they might have to go back to that room and get out the chalk again and just try to improve it still more.
There was a lot of one-out running tonight. It was just from the Broncos. That's all. They didn't have anyone running with them, so that created its own problem. Hey, before we look back at last week, give us an update of what's happening in the UK scene. Are we any closer to having Super League back on the field? The last we spoke, which was last week, was August. No change to that?
No, even though there's indications, which I think we foreshadowed last week, Jimmy, about the furloughing rules here and how much of your pay packet is paid by the government. That hasn't really led to any definitive announcements regarding Super League or the lower divisions. I know the Premier League is now, they know when they're back. Super League, I think, we'll have a look and see how that goes with the Premier League. I think they want to play as much of the season as possible in front of fans, if that is at all possible. The one thing that has happened this week is the final confirmation that the Ashes tour is off, and then we've had some debate about whether England should play against someone else, be it a home nation or indeed against an Exiles team with some very good players. I mean, imagine if Greg Inglis came over early and played for the Exiles. Then we get this extra issue, which no one's written about yet, Jimmy, is, at the end of the NRL season, when the New South Wales and Queensland players are playing Origin, all the other players should be released to represent other countries. So if England were to have a test series against, someone else, then the players really should be available to play in it, unless they're tied up in Origin. But we all know what the NRL clubs are like, and I think we could have a little bit of a what fight over that if some other matches are organised.
Yeah, it'd be disappointing, wouldn't it? I did see that Super Rugby, there's a chance that there'll be fans in the stand in 2 weeks' time when Super Rugby goes back in New Zealand. So that goes to your point about getting some fans back there. And every every competition, it seems, at the elite level and even as we trickle further down from that, have different models based on different revenue streams, you know, and some are more reliant on people turning up at games. You know, the NRL and someone like the AFL are more fortunate that, you know, basically 66% of their total revenue comes from broadcasters, which is a strength and a weakness, right? You become very reliant on them. But in a time like this, you can get the TV product away, then you get, well, they're certainly not getting what they were. They renegotiated very stridently, did Channel 9, but they got their product, which has been really good. Hey, mate,
at the risk of getting political, Jimmy, I saw an interesting. Sorry to interrupt you, but I thought this is a perfect segue to what I wanted to raise. Someone on social media said during the match tonight, apparently 10,000 people can go to a Black Lives Matter protest this weekend in Sydney, but you can't go to an NRL game. And no matter your view on that, and I certainly personally am very supportive of that cause and very, very supportive of you know, the anti-racism and us as a sort of species making progress in that area. And as we said before, when on air, I'm horrified about what's happening in the US at the moment. But it's a great point. Just purely logistically, if you take politics out of it, whatever your view is of the issues involved, it's a really good issue that the government, you know, apparently have said that it's not an illegal gathering to have 10,000 people at a march, but you can't go to the football. Tell me what you think here, Jimmy. I think the only reasons are simply it's optics. You can't deem this an illegal gathering because it's going to create too much drama for the authorities. Whereas it's much easier to say you can't go to the football. I think that, you know, that's the reason. It may not be fair, but as far as I could see, that's the only reason you can justify it.
One might be described as premeditated, as in going to the footy is, yes, you can go to the footy, whereas the other might be a bit more organic. But it's, I literally was just about to ask you, what was your take on, because I've seen some of your social media stuff throughout the course of the week. It's just, it pains me that someone can be as devoid of human emotion to have done that to George Floyd. I'm trying to remember who it was, a leader, an African-American leader who said, "We witnessed a lynching. This is what a lynching looks like."
Yeah.
And it was recorded on social media, and it was so disturbing to see the lack, how he just showed no emotion. Chauvin, the police officer, I can't believe that someone could have so much hate in their life that they would allow that. And I'm not surprised. You know, I think because of what's happened with COVID and everyone's been on edge, certainly in the US, and I know that firsthand because of family members over there. But you know, I stand with those people who are protesting about what has occurred, because we know it's not an isolated incident. And
and again,
it's very sad.
Again, I mean, the thing is, I guess this is like a rugby league show, and it's such a drop in the ocean what we think of such a massive issue like that. But I did get involved in a conversation on Facebook this week with a couple of US internationals, rugby league players. Nick Newland, the prop forward, was commenting about, you know, how terrible it was, and how, but also how, you know, that there were opportunists going to these protests and trying to create drama. And then Curtis Kunz, who's also a forward who played for the USA, who is African American, you know, got involved, and he was totally focused on the, you know, George Floyd and the horrible, you know, racism that appears endemic in parts of American life, and to sort of get involved in that conversation and sort of walk the middle of it. And you know, Nick was saying that even in terrible times of trouble like this, which should transcend, you know, left and right, that people still want to say, well, you're left or you're right if you hold a certain opinion, and that was a terrible aspect of modern life, that everything gets reduced to that. And so just again, so you know, I don't, I guess from the point of view of being a rugby league pundit and talking about these giant issues, and it's seeming, I mean, we feel like we have to talk about it, but it does affect people in our little community as well, because our little community, is the United States is part of our little community. So, yeah, and Atlanta is a sort of a newish, hotbed of our sport. Certainly, New York has been, Philadelphia, and so we know people who are affected by this, and who are scared to go outside, and whose businesses are affected, and it's a terrible time for everybody. So, I guess on one hand, someone might say you're trivialising it by talking about it on a footy show, and someone else might say you're trivialising it even more by trying to reduce it to rugby league. But I'm just trying to give make it a little bit relevant to the sport we're talking about here tonight.
I read a statistic that said that before George Floyd, black workers were being furloughed and put off by employers at a rate of 2 to 1 compared to white workers.
Mm.
So I'm not saying we're devoid of that in Australia, but it's definitely not as prominent as it seems to be in the US. What did you make of last week's round beyond the game we spoke about last Thursday, which was the Eels-Broncos game? But we've spoken very briefly. I think there's about 3.5 minutes extra ball in play each game. There's a huge amount of run meters extra per game, more tackles, etc. Certainly more points, less penalties. Was there a standout side in your mind? Was there a standout player from what you saw?
I was excited by the Raiders, but I think everyone over here in the UK who follows rugby league were excited by the Raiders, particularly by the performance of George Williams.
He was trending.
Yes, he was. He's trending in the UK. Sean Wayne must be, looking at him to be, if he has a game at the end of the year, if Sean Wayne can organise a test or two, must be looking at him to be halfback for England with maybe Gareth Widdop, his partner. But the interesting one, and to rewind a little bit, Victor Radley is eligible for England, and the question is, but Sean Wayne is quite a patriot. He doesn't seem a huge fan of Australians representing England or Kiwis or whatever, Samoans. So whether he would actually pick up the phone to Victor Radley is a big question.
I'm just, by the way, if you are watching right now, we're going out live on our Facebook page. That's Rugby League Hub on Facebook. By the way, you can we put up all our content across our social medias: Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. And we've already got our resident coach, Lee Addison, who says proper tackling stops players. Catch and wrestle manages their journey to the ground. Coaches need to teach the art of tackling again rather than catch and wrestle. That's a really interesting point based on what we've seen over the course of the last week, Steve.
Yeah, Jimmy, if I don't know if I'm on most people's screen, but if I am, you would have perhaps thought you were watching Channel 7 or Channel 9 breakfast news then, because it was like I was at a demonstration and the camera went flying. But sorry, so Lee Addison's point was about
rather than catch
tackling.
and wrestle. Rather than catch and wrestle, you need to hit with the shoulder. Remember, there was that Broncos side that would hit with the shoulder when Wayne Bennett was coaching in the mid-2000s.
Yeah, we saw a great tackle from Victor Radley this morning, didn't we? That was a hit with the shoulder and drove, and it was perfectly legal. So that is, you're right. But then it's still a matter of slowing the ball down, isn't it? I mean, that's what everyone's, no pun intended, grappling with at the moment is trying to sort of employ things they've learnt previously. Things they've been doing by almost muscle memory for the last decade, trying to apply that to the sort of modern, paradigm. So that's the issue, really.
Mate,
yeah.
what are you actually doing? The camera's going everywhere. You feel like you are in a demonstration. The glasses are on, the glasses are off, and then the glasses are back on again. So we are in the middle of a live broadcast here. You realise?
I do have a kind of a plan to only wear my glasses every second one of these shows. So this,
Okay.
but But
by the way, where's Wally? Wally's got his glasses back, or he clearly hasn't. You've got them. Hey,
you should see the other glasses.
I'll tell you what was interesting out of the point that came out of this game. James Tedesco woke up this morning, had a sniffle, had a bit of a temperature, and as a result of that, excluded from the plane. So there's the footy side of it, which is, who knows what that score would have been if James Tedesco played. But the second part of it is, wow, that's life inside the bubble.
Yeah, it is. And also a statement, you may not have seen it, but the Bulldogs put out a statement saying Terry Lamb had made contact with one of the players in the clean zone. And as a result, Terry Lamb was going to be tested for COVID-19 because it had endangered the Bulldogs' preparation for their game against the Dragons. So that's, again, completely new territory, isn't it?
He was shaking hands. I saw the photo, shaking hands with Kieran Foran, who's playing his 200th game on Monday. So good news for Bulldogs fans. But, yeah, Terry Lamb came in and shook his hand, and now we have all these protocols to follow, which I agree with. Terry Lamb's a legend of the Bulldogs and a great fellow and all that sort of stuff. But you have to preserve. You would hate to think that you would endanger rugby league by doing something like that. And I'm sure that wasn't his intent, but that's the type of situation we're faced with. I thought Tom Trbojevic...
And if he tests positive, what if he returns a positive result over the next sort of 24 hours? And then suddenly the cat's amongst the pigeons, isn't it?
You almost have to say to Kieran Foran now, presume you have COVID-19.
Mm-hmm.
Exclude yourself from all situations where you are interacting with your teammates, because if Terry has it, then you can say, okay, Kieran, so was that pre-training or post-training? Did Kieran do any high fives with the guys when he put them over for tries? And there's all sorts of things around that. Tom Trbojevic was absolutely superb for Manly the other night. You know how you get those favourite players in the league at any one point? He's mine. Just love what he does and how he does it. I'll put you on the spot, mate. A lot of people talking about it as James Tedesco, the best player in the league. If you're starting a club side tomorrow, if you needed to make them successful, just say it's the London Mascords. Which fullback do you take?
Probably James Tedesco. Yeah, probably James Tedesco. I don't know if he's got an Italian passport, it might be a quota. It might be off quota. I don't know. I'd say probably him, but only by he's an outstanding player, and they're both outstanding players. And love to see one of them play for Italy against the other one playing for Serbia one day.
What are you doing with that camera? Now I'm getting seasick.
Now I found a new position. Now I'm fine now. I have to re-download Zoom on my laptop, Jimmy. It's not working, so I'm using my phone. It's a stopgap.
I feel like I'm doing the show with Madonna when she'd have multiple costume changes. Set the scene, and she comes back, and there she is in a new outfit. That's exactly right.
Except on Vogue, I'm vague.
Games coming up this weekend. Any game in particular that you're excited about?
I'm actually quite interested in Monday because both clubs, the Dragons and the Bulldogs, are struggling at the moment. The Dragons have dominated, conversations this week. I had a Dragons fan here just 2 nights ago, was sitting in the garden as per social distancing regulations, and they're just talking about the coaching situation, and they're just obsessed with it. So Dean Pay doesn't seem to be under as much pressure because I guess he hasn't been there as long. But I'm just fascinated to see, how that game is played out, what the attack's like, what the defence is like, the body language afterwards of the coaches. And it's a funny one to pick, I know, but nevertheless.
No, it is. It is a fascinating clash on Monday. You're quite right. It's almost a question of who won't lose as opposed to who will win. But you couldn't compare the two squads. I don't think you could go anywhere near comparing the two squads. I don't think there's any doubt that the Dragons have a superior squad on paper, which often means nothing. The other big one's Parramatta and Manly. So 2 first up wins after the return from COVID. Question marks about the opposition, but two sides who I think are top 6, maybe even top 4 sides, the pair of them. I actually think that the Seagulls, if they all stay healthy, are a real outsider's chance at this premiership this year. Premiership winning coach, superstars in key positions. Hooker may be a question mark, but they're a really good side. So interested to see how they go against quality opposition. Anything else you want to update me on, Stephen?
Yeah, not a lot really. As far as the game here is concerned, we're still waiting to hear, what's going to happen. There's been, I think we've had some players go home. Jordan Rankin has gone home. Akuli Iwate has gone home, perhaps not returning. I think there was some talk about Ben Teo going to the Wolfpack, but he's now signed for Brisbane just in the last sort of half a day. It's all quiet on the Western Front, really. I guess the biggest thing, actually there is one thing, and that is the Euro 13s, which is this sort of European-wide amateur competition, which is planning to kick off next year. They've announced a number of teams that will be in it. And a lot of people are sceptical. How's this going to happen? I'm most interested that Dublin Blues are involved. I know Connor Kelly, the guy behind Dublin Blues, and Dublin Blues are the sort of the franchise that are hoping to get it. Well, they were hoping to get into the League One and do a Toronto Wolfpack. And Connor was working very hard at attracting investment and media support and all that sort of stuff. Interestingly, they're not connected to Rugby League Ireland. So it's actually quite similar to, the Wolfpack and Canadian Rugby League. Barely any connection at all. I'd imagine this sort of shortened season with amateur players would be a good sort of bridging, period for them if they want to work up to professional ranks. North Brussels Gorillas, one of the teams. There's a team from Hungary involved. Austria has been mentioned, who don't have any rugby league at the moment. So, I would say full credit to Dean Buchan, who's behind this so far. The social media presentations have been very slick, and it's exciting to see these sort of areas get involved in rugby league. And I guess the thing about it is that the standard and the level they're going to be playing at is not very high, but I think we always think that if we present things well, then we can sell it to people, and it's a lot more. It's a lot if you're an amateur team and your opponents are from another country, then that's going to win over people who wouldn't otherwise be impressed if you're just playing in a neighbouring town or another suburb. So I'll be very interested to see how this progresses over the off season.
Very, very. It's a stretch from me, but it's got that Champions League feel, right? Like the visiting club side from other competitions, which has an attraction. I think there's something in that for sure. And Valencia Hurricanes is the team that Dean's in charge of, and you know what? Playing more games in front of a few more people with a few more eyeballs across a streaming platform gets 3 ticks from me.
Yeah, very interesting. I haven't heard much about the RLEF's sort of plan for a European-wide competition, but that was a bit more ambitious and semi-professional, and apparently the two sides are speaking again now, so they're not at each other's throats.
Right, so no need to call them rebels anymore, Steve. Upset people.
Who decides? Freedom fighter or terrorist? It depends on your perspective, I guess.
That's it. Sounds like you've been writing the Super League book. Very good, mate. Well done. Well done tonight to the Sydney Roosters. They were outstanding. Have a great day, mate, and stay safe.
You too. And I guess we're back next week, are we?
Why not?
Okay. See you, Jimmy.
Good one, mate. See you, Steve.